Obsession can be dangerous. In some cases, it can become deadly. Today's case is a story of jealousy, obsession, and a murder that haunted investigators for years. Hey, friends! You're listening to Cold-Blooded Serial, and I am your host and true crime bestie, Tika. Today, we're diving into the shocking case of Stephanie Lazarus, a woman who got away with a horrific crime for over 2 decades. We're gonna talk about the people in this love triangle. But first, we'll talk about the innocent and beautiful Sherri Rasmussen. And poor Sherri didn't even know that she was a part of this love triangle. Sherri Rasmussen was born on February 7th, 1957 in Walla Walla, Washington, to Nels and Loretta Rasmussen. Sherri had 2 sisters, Teresa and Connie. She began college at La Sierra University at 16 years old after graduating from high school. Yeah, friends, Sherri was not only beautiful, she was a genius. And in 1980, at the age of 23, she was awarded her master's degree in nursing from UCLA. After her degree, Sherri was promoted to head nurse of UCLA's Coronary Care and Observation Unit. Friends, Sherri's just young and beautiful and just doing her thing, okay? She is smart, and based on what friends who knew her said, she had a really great personality. She was also very down to earth. By her late 20s, Sherri was the director of nursing at Glendale Adventist Medical Center. Like I said, she was remembered for being very compassionate and gentle, hardworking, and caring. Now we're going to talk about the second person in this love triangle, the person in the middle, the man in the middle, John Ruetten. From 1978 to 1982, John Ruetten was a mechanical engineering major at UCLA. It was there that he met the third person involved, Stephanie Lazarus. Per mutual friends of both John and Stephanie seemed to take their relationship more seriously than John did. And this sometimes happens, right? It's not always a red flag or anything. It's just that one person just wants a little more than the other person is willing to give. But Stephanie started doing things that should have been a major red flag to John. And Mr. Athletic Johnny Ruetten should have used his athletic abilities to sprint away from Stephanie. Let me tell you why. There were numerous times where Stephanie was caught stealing John's clothes while he was in the shower. And then she sometimes took pictures of him while he was in his underwear asleep. If those aren't red flags, I don't know what is. So, John Ruetten said that he never considered his relationship with Stephanie Lazarus as anything more than necking and fooling around, which I've never heard the term necking before, but I'm assuming it just means making out. If she's acting this crazy just from some kisses, can you imagine, if they actually hook up, how crazy she's gonna be? So, this was between 1978 and 1982 while he was in college. John said that the first time they did hook up was after he graduated in 1981. He said that they would often see each other about 2 to 3 times a month, occasionally taking trips together, and some of these times they would actually have intercourse. Stephanie graduated in 1982, and after her graduation from UCLA, she was admitted into the city's police academy and became a uniformed police officer in 1983. Yeah, friends, this psycho is a police officer. So we have a handsome, athletic male in the middle, a psycho friend who is a police officer, and the head of nursing, who right now, Sherri doesn't even know that Stephanie or John exists. Once they meet, in Stephanie's eyes, Sherri is the other woman. Sherri is the one who stole her man and Sherri has got to go. So, these two young adults, John and Stephanie, are still seeing each other. They're going on dates. Stephanie thinks John is her boyfriend. John thinks of Stephanie as a friend with benefits, and he's dating around. Honestly, this all probably could have been avoided had he made it clear to her, especially after she stole his clothes and took pictures of him while he was asleep. He should have been like, you know what? Let me stop her right here and let her know what this is. Stephanie's not going to bring it up because in her mind, yeah, John, you're my boyfriend because we're hooking up, we're kissing, we're going on trips together. Why would you do that if I wasn't your girlfriend? All right, so like I said, Playboy Johnny here is dating around, and one of the women that he starts to date is his future wife, Sherri Rasmussen. Everyone said that John fell for her as soon as they met in June 1984. So, how did they meet, right? Well, Sherri and John met at a party with a roaring 20s theme, and the two of them started dating shortly afterwards. John Ruetten says it was love at first sight. Yeah, how do you think Stephanie is going to feel about this? Let's see what happens. Sherri and John were engaged within a year. And by the time that they were engaged, Stephanie Lazarus was now a patrol officer with the LAPD. And friends, when I tell you that she flipped out, like she was beyond upset. And she calls up her boyfriend, who's not really her boyfriend. And she's like, John, I need you to come over here. We need to talk about this. Like, what's this rumor that I'm hearing that you're engaged? So she begs John to come over to her Woodland Hills condo. And when he arrives, she declares her love for him. She's swearing that she had deeper feelings for him all along, and she loves him far more than this silly Sherri person would ever or could ever love him. And friends, get this. John's dumbass ends up having intercourse with her after this conversation before he left her apartment. Like, why would you do that? Like, she's shown so many signs of being crazy. You know that you don't love her. You love Sherri. And Miss Psychotic Stephanie is like, this is not over, not by a long shot. And in November 1985, she shows up to Sherri's place of employment at Glendale Adventist Hospital and aggressively confronts Sherri, telling her that she's been John's girlfriend all along and was still in contact with John. And this was all shortly before Sherri and John tied the knot, also in November 1985. So they didn't say how Sherri brought this up to John afterwards, but Sherri did call her dad up because she was really close with her dad. It was like, a woman with crazy eyes came and verbally attacked me today over John. So, like, if something happens to me, Dad, it's this woman, it's John's ex. Sherri didn't give him a name, and John didn't give him a name either. The only way that they were able to describe Stephanie later on is to say the woman with crazy eyes. If you look at the cover of this episode, you'll see her crazy eyes. You'll see what Sherri was talking about. So, in the early years as a patrol officer, the life of Stephanie Lazarus revolves around John Ruetten. Stephanie's former roommate, Michael Hargraves, who was also a fellow officer, said that Stephanie didn't date anyone but John. She told me that she was in love with him. And late one night, her roommate, Michael, was awakened by Stephanie, who had become distraught. She was crying so hard about being dumped by John. A few months before her confrontation with Sherri at the hospital, in June 1985, Stephanie wrote, "I really don't feel like working. I found out that John is getting married. I was very depressed. very sad. My concentration was -10. And over the next few months, she would frequently become depressed, mourning over the man that she never had, that she felt she lost. Her former roommate, Michael, also said that she had a John standard. She was very picky. Any man she went out with had to be tall, athletic, and handsome, just like John. Friends, like, am I the only one who thinks that this is a little crazy, or are you guys all in agreement with me? So, her former roommate, Michael, had enough after she told him that she visited John's fiancée, Sherri, at her place of employment. And Michael's like, listen, girl, you need to move on. You're being crazy. He's moved on. He's engaged. It's time for you to move on too. And he ended up moving out of her condo on Valentine's Day of 1986, 2 weeks before Sherri Rasmussen's murder. Yeah. Okay, friends. So now let's fast forward to 2 weeks after Valentine's Day of 1986. It is now Monday, February 24th, 1986. John Ruetten pulled into the driveway of the Van Nuys condo that he shared with his new wife, Sherri. When he pulled in, the garage door for Unit 205 was already open, and Sherri's 1985 BMW, which he bought for her as an engagement gift, was gone. So, of course, he's like, maybe something happened at the hospital and she rushed out of our condo, leaving the garage door open. I shouldn't worry, right? Their condo was in a gated complex. It had 3 levels and a garage that was below. Their bedrooms, their kitchen, and dinette were all on the upper floors, with a short staircase leading down to a carpeted living room. Now you can kind of picture what their condo looks like. So John gets out of his car and he begins walking up the pavement. And he says that there's glass fragments glittered on the asphalt. And of course, he's like, what happened here? But he figured that his beautiful new wife was away and perhaps had done something to her car while backing out. No reason to panic. He continues to make his way into his home when he finds that the upstairs door is ajar. He's still just wondering what happened. And with each step, poor John seems to be oblivious to the gathering signs of tragedy. I'm going to pause here, and we're going to talk about the start of their day on Monday, February 24th, 1986, all the way up until where he finds the glass fragments and the open garage door and the condo door that is slightly ajar. So, on this Monday morning, the 29-year-old newly married Sherri told her husband, John Ruetten, that she wasn't feeling well and was going to stay home. Her handsome 6'3", 27-year-old new husband left for his engineering job at about 7:20 that morning. While at work, he did call home about 5 times, but thought nothing of it when he couldn't reach her. After all, she could be sleeping because she wasn't feeling well. Now it's the evening. John is inside of their condo and he's looking for his new wife, as she was sick earlier. He goes to the living room, and on the carpet in front of the fireplace, he sees his beloved Sherri Ray Rasmussen. What was Sherri doing lying in the middle of the living room floor? He wondered in the split second before realizing the horror of his wife's death. When the police arrived to photograph the crime scene, they found her on her back with stiffened limbs raised off the floor like those of a dead animal. Her face was battered with a bloodied nose and half-crossed eyes. One of her lids was swollen shut, and a criminalist from the coroner's department would later guess that her eye had been struck by the muzzle of a pistol. Okay, I've done quite a few cases. I even wrote out what I'm sharing to you guys. I don't know why all of a sudden I'm feeling emotional. I don't know why the stiffened limbs triggered something in me. Usually it's only hearing about children that makes me emotional. So the police also found 3 dark holes grouped in a tight constellation around her heart, marking the entry of .38 caliber slugs. Sherri also had a bruise on her left arm, which indicated that someone had bit her during their ferocious struggle. There were also fragments from a heavy ceramic vase nearby, and a little further away were a trio of roses that sat in another vase, marking the couple's 3-month wedding anniversary. To the police, the attack on Sherri Rasmussen did not seem to be a random act of violence, but rather one driven by a personal vendetta. Yeah, police, it's one of your own and you don't even know. The lead homicide investigator, Detective Lyle Mayer, told Sherri's father that she hadn't been killed but assassinated. Detective Lyle Mayer hypothesized almost right away that 2 burglars had surprised and murdered Sherri before running away. There were stereo components piled near the front door, ready to go, and a drawer had been pulled out from a living room table. It was textbook stuff. His theory was only believed 6 weeks later when a woman on the same street surprised 2 armed men who were robbing her condo. Still, Detective Lyle Mayer followed procedure and asked John Rutan about the people in their inner circle who the police might want to interview. John tried to gather his thoughts. There were Sherri's sisters and his brother-in-law who had recently spent time with Sherri. There was a nurse who'd been her roommate before John moved into the condo. And there was a woman named Stephanie Lazarus, a friend, he said, from his student days at UCLA. Johnny boy, you cannot be this oblivious. You cannot be this ignorant to think that Stephanie's name should have been the last name that you gave. Like, all the signs are pointing to her. She should have been at the top of your list. John made it seem like they were just friends, not friends with benefits, just friends who haven't seen each other since college. So there's no way it could be Stephanie, right? He didn't mention that right before he got married, he hooked up with her. He didn't mention any of that. He didn't mention that this psycho woman came and confronted his wife at her job and made threats to her. He didn't mention any of that. For all the police know, Stephanie is a good person who John has not seen since college. Yeah, freaking arrest him too, okay? Because why are you being so secretive? So John tells detectives that Stephanie is merely a former girlfriend who is now a police officer with the LAPD. Stephanie Lazarus's name only appears once in the investigator's notes that was entered nearly 21 months after Sherri Rasmussen's murder. So, Sherri's parents, Nels and Loretta Rasmussen, pressed Detective Mayer to look into a woman their daughter said harassed her. John wouldn't give them her name, which is weird, and which is really pissing me off because, John, what the? This chick just killed your wife, and you're like, no, I gotta protect her. No! Don't you want justice for Sherri? Oh my God, friends. John is just straight up pissing me off now, okay? Because not only is he withholding the information about how Stephanie really was, he also had intercourse 2 more times after his wife was murdered. And then they also went on a trip together. But after this last time, I guess Stephanie was like, the spark is gone, and fell out of contact with John. What? Can you believe this? Like, you killed someone, all for this one guy that you wanted so badly, and now that the wife is dead, you're like, and then that's it. Bye, John. Freaking crazy, right? So, Sherri's parents, Nels and Loretta Rasmussen, tell the detective that they didn't know this woman's name, but they knew two things for sure. She was their son-in-law's ex-girlfriend, and she was a cop. They also tell the detective that in late 1985, now mind you, Sherri and John got married in November 1985, so that is late 1985, right? So in late 1985, Sherri's parents had received numerous phone calls from their daughter describing unwanted visits from John's ex. Sherri's dad, Nels, said, "She had been to the house at least 3 times. Sherri told me that one time, Stephanie brought over her snow skis to have John wax them. My daughter Sherri left and went into another room while Stephanie and John talked. Later, when Stephanie returned to get the skis, Sherri told her that she didn't want her to come back to the house. Then, every time that Sherri went to the gym, Psycho Stephanie was there. When Sherri was at the mall, Psycho Stephanie was there. When Sherri went grocery shopping, yeah, that's right, friends, Psycho Stephanie was there. But she never told her parents the name of Psycho Stephanie Lazarus. So, unfortunately, the cops were like, hey, there's nothing we can do. So now, it's 23 years later. The LAPD is finally looking to Stephanie Lazarus as a suspect in Sherri Rasmussen's murder, which remained unsolved for 23 freaking years. Sherri Rasmussen's cold case file was shipped to the Cold Case Homicide Unit, which was formed in 2001. A promising lead emerged in December 2004, which was 11 years after Sherri Rasmussen's parents offered to pay for DNA testing, which was rebuffed by the LAPD. Her parents offered a $10,000 reward to have the DNA from the bite mark tested. And the LAPD was like, no, we can't do it. And the saliva sample failed to produce a match to any criminals in the FBI's database because that trail vanished. The LAPD was like, no, we gotta protect our girl, okay? But in December 2004, the SID analysis brought about one interesting new fact. The attacker, or the person, the bite marker, the bite marker had been a woman. So now, with this new cold case division in Van Nuys, their homicide detective, Rob Bubb, had the day off when he got the call from the crime lab. And he knew it. Stephanie Lazarus's DNA, which was secretly obtained the week before, matched the saliva sample from the bite on Sherri Rasmussen's arm. So, we're going to fast forward a few years. This took place in December 2004. We're going to fast forward to May 2009, which was 4 months after Detective Bubb and the trio of detectives that he supervises picked the Sherri Rasmussen file back up. Now, I don't know why they took a 5-year break, but hey, you know, they did. I guess better late than never. And they said that due to the speed that news and rumors travel within the LAPD, the team had to keep its work sealed off from the rest of the department when they began digging. Not even Detective Bubb's immediate superior knew of the investigation during its first 60 days. What really stood out to these detectives was that 14 days after Sherri Rasmussen was shot dead, Stephanie reported that her backup pistol, a .38 caliber, had been stolen in Santa Monica. She filed the theft report in Santa Monica and not to her own department, which only piqued their suspicions. The more that they studied the murder scene, the more it seemed like a staged crime scene. Detective Bubb's Details had begun its investigation in February 2009 with a list of 5 women who had ties to Sherri Rasmussen at the time of her death. It didn't take long for the detectives to eliminate all the women except for Stephanie Lazarus. In late May/early June 2009, this cold case team would handle her arrest quietly, and Detective Bub made sure that none of the officers in this team knew her. Then, at about 4 a.m. on the morning of June 5th, 2009, dozens of LAPD members gathered for a briefing in an auditorium at the police academy. They were told that some of them would be participating in an operation involving search warrant services outside the city limits. Teams were to go from the academy to pre-arranged locations, where, upon receiving phone calls, they would open sealed envelopes containing instructions about their target searches. That sounds like a movie. Oh my gosh. This is insane. I'm pretty sure that their adrenaline was so high right now because they're legit doing a scene from a spy movie where they're gonna go catch the bad guy, right? So, this meeting started at 4 a.m. By 6:30 a.m., Stephanie Lazarus had settled down at her desk, and Detective Daniel Jaramillo from Robbery Homicide dropped by. He'd been working on a case with an art theft angle, because that's what she does now. She tries to catch art thieves. And he told her that he needed her to question a suspect. So I'm pretty sure Stephanie's yeah, I've gotten away with this murder for over 20 years. I could just relax, there's no way anyone suspects me. Once inside the interrogation room, she was greeted by Detective Greg Stearns, and the two men got down to their real subject, Sherri Rasmussen's murder. The conversation, captured by a hidden camera, is on YouTube, and the detectives tell Stephanie they called her in because her name came up in a case that they've been reviewing. They explain that they're only after information about Sherri Rasmussen and John Ruetten, but then they ask questions about hostility that Stephanie might have felt toward the nurse as a romantic rival. Stephanie is clearly shocked and upset by the initial questions, but settles into a strategy of acting as though John was just some guy she knew at UCLA in the last century. Then Detective Jaramillo is like, hey, would you submit a DNA sample? And Stephanie is like, what? How dare you? I am a fellow police officer. How dare you ask for my DNA sample? How dare you accuse me of doing something to her? I told you, I haven't seen John since college. Stephanie throws her little fit. She walks into the hallway, and surprisingly, other detectives are right there waiting for her. Stephanie Lazarus was then placed under arrest by Detective Jaramillo. She was charged with committing murder while serving on the force, and for nearly a quarter century, she was never on anyone's radar except Nels and Loretta Rasmussen's. 3 years after her arrest, on June 6, 2012, Stephanie appeared in court for her first day of trial. She was incarcerated for 32 months due to her $10 million bond. The case prosecutor, Shannon Presby, announced in his opening statement, the case was about a bite, a bullet, a gun barrel, and a broken heart. Stephanie Lazarus denied all of the charges and did not testify. However, John Ruetten, who had remarried, appeared as a prosecution witness. During the trial, he was 53 years old and choked up several times, reaching for a Kleenex box when reconstructing the day of his first wife's murder. He explained his decision to have intercourse with Stephanie after their stormy meeting in 1985 as a way to give her closure. He said, "She was upset. I felt bad. I was a stupid and young man." John Ruetten seemed to shrink a little bit as he also confessed that they had intercourse after his wife's murder, as well as his decision in 1989 to join her in Hawaii with some friends for a vacation. Friends, doesn't that just piss you off? After his wife was brutally murdered, he was living his best life with the psychopath who had the mentality of, if I can't have you, nobody can. They're going on vacation, living life like they're a couple. He's not even mourning. There should be a crime against that. Anyways, John was asked by the prosecutor why he hadn't forcefully brought Stephanie Lazarus to the attention of the LAPD in 1986. And he answered, "It never crossed my mind that Stephanie had anything to do with it." Are you fucking kidding me? He said that the original detective, Lyle Mayer, told him shortly after Sherri Rasmussen's murder that he had cleared Stephanie Lazarus of any suspicions. Of course, she's a cop, just like the detective is. But I feel like if John would have been like, no, she really is a psycho, let me give you the long list of reasons why, maybe they would have been forced to look into it a little more. Or if he would have brought it to the news, that would have forced their hands too. Nels Rasmussen, Sherri's dad, said, "I think John wanted to save his own ass. I never thought John had anything to do with it, but he knows more than he said or admitted to. That bothered me, and it bothers me today. John could have helped more than he did, but he wouldn't talk. If John would have backed me just a little when I was saying that they needed to talk to Stephanie, I think the story would have been different." Sherri's parents, Nels and Loretta, attended the trial every day, spending their nights in a 37-foot motorhome in an RV park in Loma Linda. On March 8, 2012, the jury, who had taken 3 days to resolve a case that had gone unsolved for so long, found Stephanie Lazarus guilty of first-degree murder. Lazarus's husband and her mother immediately left the courtroom. Nels and Loretta Rasmussen sat in their second-row seats, motionless, except for the sobs that racked their bodies. On May 11, 2012, Judge Robert Perry handed down Stephanie Lazarus's sentence, 27 years to life. Stephanie finally confessed to her crime in 2023 when she requested parole, which was initially granted but quickly rescinded after California Governor Gavin Newsom expressed concerns that she evaded justice for more than 2 decades and did not appear to begin taking full accountability for the murder until she was finally caught. According to a transcript from her 2023 parole hearing, Stephanie Lazarus said, "It makes me sick to this day that I took an oath to protect and serve people. And I took Sherri Rasmussen's life from her, a nurse. All I could think about was getting out of there before the police showed up. I will never, ever harm an individual like I did on February 24th, 1986, when I murdered, callously murdered, and heinously murdered Sherri Rasmussen." Her last parole bid, which came in May 2024, suffered a setback when the parole board ordered a new hearing to determine if there was good cause to rescind the parole grant. As of February 2025, Stephanie Lazarus, who is now 64, will be eligible for parole in 2028. But she is eligible to file a petition for an earlier hearing should there be a change in circumstances. And friends, that's the chilling conclusion to the tragic murder of Sherri Rasmussen. An innocent life taken by someone hiding behind a badge. It's a haunting reminder that sometimes the real danger lurks closer than we think. If this case left you speechless, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe, share, and leave a review to help more listeners discover cold-blooded serial. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.